Ryan, a racist white man, attacks a black woman on a plane, unaware that his actions are about to backfire spectacularly. But as he realizes too late who is sitting behind him, the situation takes a shocking turn. How will he react when an unexpected twist changes everything? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Ryan stood in his cluttered studio apartment, surrounded by half-finished canvases and paint-splattered dropcloths. His hands trembled slightly as he zipped up his suitcase, the weight of anticipation settling heavy on his shoulders. "This is it," he muttered to himself, running a hand through his hair. "My big chance." The upcoming meeting with Mr. Benjamin loomed large in Ryan's mind. He had dreamed of this moment for years, a chance to showcase his art in a prestigious museum, to finally be recognized for his talent. The rejection letters that papered his walls seemed to mock him, reminders of all the times he had fallen short. Ryan's gaze fell on his latest piece, still drying on the easel. It was a swirl of vibrant colors, emotions poured onto canvas. He hoped it would be enough to impress Mr. Benjamin. As he gathered his portfolio, Ryan's thoughts drifted to the long journey ahead. The flight to Spain felt like a bridge between his struggling past and a potentially brilliant future. His stomach churned with a mix of excitement and dread. "I can't mess this up," he said aloud, his voice echoing in the empty apartment. "Not after everything I've been through." Memories of harsh critiques and dismissive gallery owners flashed through his mind. Each rejection had cut deep, leaving scars on his confidence. But they had also fueled his determination, pushing him to prove everyone wrong. Ryan checked his watch and cursed under his breath. He was running late. Grabbing his luggage, he hurried out the door, nearly forgetting to lock up in his haste. As he hailed a taxi, his agitation grew. "Airport, please," he barked at the driver, drumming his fingers impatiently on his knee. "And step on it." The taxi weaved through traffic, but to Ryan it felt agonizingly slow. His mind raced ahead to Spain, to the museum, to Mr. Benjamin's discerning eye. Would his art be good enough? Would he finally get the recognition he craved? As the airport came into view, Ryan's chest tightened with anxiety. This trip represented everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed. He couldn't shake the feeling that his entire future hinged on this one meeting. Stepping out of the taxi, Ryan took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. But the knot in his stomach only grew tighter. He was ready for this opportunity, but the fear of failure lingered, a constant companion as he made his way into the bustling airport. Ryan strode down the narrow aisle of the plane, his portfolio clutched tightly to his chest. He glanced at his watch for the 10th time in as many minutes, frustration etched across his face. The flight was already delayed, and every second felt like an eternity. "Excuse me," he muttered, pushing past a family struggling with their luggage. His eyes scanned the row numbers impatiently. Finally, he found his seat. A sigh of relief escaped his lips, only to be cut short when he noticed his seatmate. An elderly black woman sat in the window seat, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Ryan's jaw clenched as he stowed his bag overhead. He had hoped for a quiet flight, maybe even an empty seat next to him. Instead, he'd be stuck next to this old lady for hours. As he settled into his seat, the woman turned to him with a warm smile. "Hello there," she said, her voice soft and friendly. "I'm Ruth." Ryan grunted in response, barely glancing her way. He pulled out his phone, checking the time again. The plane began to taxi, but Ryan's agitation only grew. His leg bounced up and down, jostling the seat in front of him. Come on," he muttered under his breath. "We're already late. Some of us have important meetings to get to." Ruth tilted her head, concern creasing her brow. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked gently. Ryan's irritation boiled over. He turned to Ruth, his eyes flashing. "No, I'm not all right," he snapped. "This flight is delayed, and now I'm stuck here next to—" He caught himself, but the implication hung in the air. Ruth's smile faltered, but she remained calm. "I understand you're frustrated," she began. "Perhaps we could—" "Look," Ryan interrupted, his voice low and harsh. "I don't need your understanding. I just need peace and quiet. Is that too much to ask? The plane lifted off the ground, but Ryan barely noticed. His face was flushed, his hands clenched into fists on the armrests. The weight of his prejudices pressed down on him, as heavy as the air pressure changing around them. Ruth fell silent, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and compassion. She turned to look out the window, giving Ryan the space he had so rudely demanded. As the plane climbed higher, Ryan's words hung between them, an invisible barrier more divisive than the armrest they shared. Ryan's frustration reached its boiling point. He turned to Ruth, his face red with anger. "That's it. I can't take this anymore," he exploded, his voice rising above the hum of the engines. "I need to change seats. I refuse to sit next to someone like you for this entire flight." Ruth's eyes widened in surprise, but she maintained her composure. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said softly. "Is there something I've done to upset you?" Ryan scoffed, his words dripping with disdain. "You don't get it, do you? Just being here next to me is enough. I shouldn't have to explain myself to you." The commotion caught the attention of nearby passengers. Heads turned, and whispers began to spread through the cabin. A flight attendant, alerted by the rising voices, hurried down the aisle. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her eyes darting between Ryan and Ruth. "No, it's not," Ryan snapped. "I want a different seat. Now." The flight attendant tried to calm him down. "Sir, please lower your voice. Your reason of request is invalid." Ryan cut her off. "I don't care. Find me another seat. I can't sit here." More passengers were now openly staring, discomfort evident on their faces. Some shook their heads in disapproval, while others whispered among themselves. Through it all, Ruth remained a picture of grace. She looked at Ryan with kind eyes, her voice steady and warm. "I understand you're upset, sir. Is there something we can do to make this situation better for both of us?" But Ryan was beyond reason. He glared at Ruth, his words sharp and hurtful. "The only thing that would make this better is if you weren't here. Do you know who I am? I have an important meeting in Spain, and I don't need to be distracted by sitting next to someone like you." The flight attendant placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to calm down. Your behavior is disturbing other passengers." Ryan shrugged off her hand. "Don't touch me, just get me away from her." The tension in the cabin was palpable. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some looking away in embarrassment, others watching the scene unfold with a mix of shock and disapproval. Through it all, Ruth remained calm, her hands folded in her lap. She looked at Ryan with a mixture of sadness and compassion, her voice soft but firm. "I'm sorry you're so upset. Perhaps if we talked, we could find a way to make this flight pleasant for both of us." But Ryan was too far gone in his anger to listen. He continued to demand a new seat, his voice echoing through the cabin, making the already tense atmosphere almost unbearable. As the tension in the cabin reached its peak, a tall, distinguished-looking man in his late 50s stood up from the seat behind Ryan. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos unfolding before him. This was Mr. Benjamin, the museum director Ryan was so eager to impress. Mr. Benjamin cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the noise. "Excuse me, sir," he addressed Ryan directly, his tone firm but measured. "I couldn't help but overhear your comments, and I must say, they're not only disrespectful to this kind lady, but also making everyone on this plane extremely uncomfortable." Ryan whirled around, his face flushed with anger. "Mind your own business," he snapped, not realizing who he was addressing. "This doesn't concern you." Mr. Benjamin raised an eyebrow, his composure unwavering. "On the contrary, it concerns all of us. Your behavior is disrupting this flight and showing a shocking lack of respect for your fellow passengers." Ryan's eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with contempt. "Who do you think you are? You don't know me or my situation." "Perhaps not," Mr. Benjamin replied calmly. "But I know that treating others with dignity is a basic human courtesy, regardless of who they are or where they're from." Ryan scoffed, his anger building. "Oh, spare me the lecture. You have no idea what's at stake for me on this trip. I don't need distractions." Mr. Benjamin's gaze hardened slightly. "And what could possibly be so important that it justifies treating another person this way?" Ryan opened his mouth to retort, but Mr. Benjamin continued, his voice low but clear. Your actions speak volumes about your character, sir. Is this truly how you want to represent yourself? The cabin fell silent, all eyes on the confrontation. Ryan's face contorted with fury, his fists clenched at his sides. "You don't get to judge me," he shouted, his voice echoing in the quiet cabin. "I said mind your own business." Mr. Benjamin stood his ground, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Ryan's explosive anger. When someone chooses to make a public spectacle of their prejudice, it becomes everyone's business, he said firmly. Your behavior is unacceptable and it needs to stop. The flight attendants, sensing the escalating situation, quickly made their way down the aisle. A young woman with a kind face approached Ryan, her voice calm but firm. "Sir, I'm going to need you to lower your voice and return to your seat. We can't have this kind of disturbance on the flight." Ryan turned to her, his face red with anger. "Can't you see I'm the victim here? I shouldn't have to sit next to—" He gestured dismissively at Ruth, who sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. The flight attendant shook her head. "Sir, please. We're not asking you to change seats. We're asking you to calm down and be respectful to all our passengers." Ryan scoffed, crossing his arms. "Respectful? What about my rights? I paid for this seat." Another flight attendant joined them, his voice steady. "Sir, if you can't control your behavior, we'll have no choice but to take further action." Ryan's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing his face. He glanced around, noticing the uncomfortable stares from other passengers. Slowly, he lowered himself back into his seat, muttering under his breath. The flight attendants turned to the rest of the cabin. "We apologize for the disturbance, everyone. Please try to relax and enjoy your flight. If anyone needs anything, don't hesitate to call us." As the crew moved away, an uneasy quiet settled over the plane. Ruth sat motionless, her eyes closed, her face a mask of serenity. Her calmness seemed to highlight Ryan's agitation even more. Ryan shifted in his seat, avoiding eye contact with anyone. His mind raced, trying to justify his actions. "They don't understand," he thought. "I have important things to do. I can't afford any distractions." He snuck a glance at Ruth, a twinge of shame flickering in his chest. For a moment, he wondered if he'd gone too far. But as quickly as the thought came, he pushed it away. "No," he told himself firmly. "I'm right. They're all wrong." Ryan's thoughts turned to Mr. Benjamin and the upcoming meeting. He imagined walking into the museum, his artwork praised and admired. The fantasy soothed his bruised ego, pushing away any lingering doubts about his behavior. "That's what matters," he thought, clenching his fists. "My art, my success, nothing else." As the flight continued, the tension in the cabin remained palpable. Passengers whispered among themselves, throwing wary glances in Ryan's direction. But Ryan ignored them all, lost in his own world of ambition and self-justification. As the flight continued, Ryan sat rigidly in his seat, his eyes fixed straight ahead. The cabin's atmosphere remained tense, with occasional whispers and glances directed his way. Despite his efforts to focus solely on his upcoming meeting, unwelcome thoughts began to creep into his mind. Memories of his past bubbled to the surface. He remembered the countless rejections he'd faced, the doors slammed in his face, and the harsh critiques of his work. Each recollection stung, reminding him of the pain and frustration he'd endured. Ryan's gaze flickered to Ruth, who sat peacefully beside him. A pang of guilt hit him as he recalled his harsh words. For a brief moment, he saw not just an elderly woman, but a person with her own story, her own struggles. He wondered what experiences she might have faced in her life, what obstacles she might have overcome. These thoughts made Ryan uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat, trying to push them away. "No," he thought firmly. "I can't let myself get distracted. This meeting is too important." He closed his eyes, attempting to visualize his artwork hanging in the museum. He imagined the admiring glances, the praise from critics, the validation he'd longed for. Yet, even as he clung to these dreams, a nagging voice in the back of his mind whispered that something was wrong. The plane began its descent, jolting Ryan from his thoughts. As the aircraft touched down, A mix of emotions washed over him. Relief flooded through him at the thought of escaping the cramped space and the judging eyes of his fellow passengers. Yet, a sense of dread also crept in as he realized he would soon have to face the consequences of his actions. As the seatbelt sign dinged off, Ryan remained seated, suddenly unsure of himself. He watched as other passengers began to gather their belongings, some still casting wary glances in his direction. The reality of what had transpired during the flight began to sink in, and with it came a wave of shame. Ryan's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his carry-on bag. He snuck a glance at Ruth, who was calmly collecting her things. The contrast between her composure and his inner turmoil was stark, making him feel even more uncomfortable. As passengers started to file out of the plane, Ryan hesitated. Part of him wanted to rush off, to escape the lingering tension and disapproving looks. Another part, a quieter voice he rarely listened to, urged him to apologize, to make amends somehow. He stood up, his legs feeling unsteady beneath him. As he prepared to step into the aisle, Ryan found himself at a crossroads. The exhibition and Mr. Benjamin's approval still loomed large in his mind, but now they were tinged with uncertainty. For the first time in a long while, Ryan questioned whether success was worth the cost of his humanity. As Ryan stepped off the plane, he felt a rush of relief wash over him. The cramped confines of the aircraft and the tense atmosphere were finally behind him. He strode purposefully through the jet bridge, eager to put distance between himself and the uncomfortable memories of the flight. The bustling airport terminal greeted him with a cacophony of sounds and a sea of unfamiliar faces. Ryan weaved his way through the crowd, his mind already shifting to thoughts of his upcoming meeting. He had worked too hard and come too far to let one unpleasant incident derail his dreams. "It's over now," he muttered to himself, adjusting the strap of his bag. Time to focus on what really matters. As he made his way to baggage claim, Ryan overheard snippets of conversations around him. A group of friends chatted animatedly about their trip, their words punctuated with laughter and excitement. But it was a different conversation that caught his attention and made him pause mid-step. "Just basic human decency, you know," a woman's voice drifted over. "It doesn't cost anything to be kind." Ryan's jaw clenched. He quickened his pace, trying to outrun the words that seemed to follow him. But as he waited for his luggage, more voices filtered through. "Respect is so important," an elderly man was saying to his companion. "Especially when traveling. We're all in this together, aren't we?" Ryan's fingers drummed impatiently against his leg. He snatched his suitcase from the conveyor belt the moment it appeared, eager to escape the airport and these unwelcome reminders. As he headed towards the exit, searching for a taxi, the incident on the plane kept replaying in his mind. Ruth's kind face, Mr. Benjamin's stern words, the disapproving looks from other passengers, they all swirled in his thoughts, refusing to be ignored. "No," Ryan said firmly to himself. "I can't let this distract me. The exhibition is what matters now." He hailed a cab and climbed in, giving the driver the hotel address. As the city scenery flashed by outside the window, Ryan tried to focus on his goals. He visualized his artwork hanging in the prestigious museum, imagined the accolades and recognition he'd receive. But even as he clung to these dreams, the echoes of kindness and respect he'd heard in the airport continued to linger in the back of his mind, quiet but persistent reminders of the day's events. Ryan stepped into the hotel lobby, his eyes widening at the elegant decor. The marble floors gleamed beneath his feet, and crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of fresh flowers that adorned the reception desk. "Welcome to Hotel Majestic," the receptionist greeted him with a warm smile. "How may I assist you?" Ryan straightened his posture, feeling a surge of confidence. "Reservation for Ryan, please. I'm here for an important meeting." As the receptionist tapped away at her computer, Ryan's excitement bubbled up inside him. He could almost see his artwork hanging on the museum walls, could almost hear the applause at his exhibition opening. "Here's your key card, Mr. Ryan. You're in room 507. The elevators are just around the corner," the receptionist said, handing him a sleek card. Ryan nodded his thanks and headed towards the elevators, his steps light and purposeful. He pressed the call button and waited, his mind already racing with ideas for his presentation to Mr. Benjamin. As he stood there, a conversation from nearby caught his attention. Two well-dressed women were chatting animatedly about an art exhibition they had just attended. It was so refreshing to see such diverse artists represented, one woman said. It's about time the industry embraced inclusivity. Her companion nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Art should reflect all voices and experiences. It's wonderful to see museums taking steps in that direction. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, their words stirring up memories of the plane incident. He frowned, a flicker of doubt creeping into his mind. But as quickly as it came, he pushed it away. Focus, Ryan, he muttered to himself. This is your chance. Don't let anything distract you. The elevator dinged, its doors sliding open. Ryan stepped inside, grateful for the momentary solitude. As he ascended to his floor, he took deep breaths, centering himself. Mr. Benjamin will be impressed, Ryan told his reflection in the mirrored walls. Your talent speaks for itself. That's all that matters. The elevator stopped at his floor and Ryan stepped out, his confidence restored. He found his room and swiped the key card, eager to settle in and prepare for the meeting that could change everything. After a few hours, Ryan entered the conference room, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. The room was spacious and bright, with large windows offering a stunning view of the city. A long mahogany table dominated the center, its surface gleaming under the soft lights. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for. The chance to showcase his talent and secure his place in the art world. Ryan chose a seat near the head of the table, straightening his jacket and running a hand through his hair. He placed his portfolio on the table, his fingers lingering on its cover. Inside were the pieces that would change his life. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second amplifying Ryan's anticipation. He drummed his fingers on the table, his eyes darting to the door every few moments. Finally, the door opened. Ryan stood up, a welcoming smile plastered on his face. But as the figure stepped into the room, the smile froze, then slowly faded. Mr. Benjamin walked in, his posture straight and his gaze steady. It was the same man who had confronted Ryan on the plane, the same man who had witnessed his shameful behavior. Ryan's composure crumbled. His mouth went dry and he could feel the color draining from his face. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. His actions on the plane hadn't just been a momentary lapse in judgment. They had potentially cost him everything. Mr. Benjamin's expression was unreadable as he approached the table. His eyes, which had been filled with disappointment and anger on the plane, now held a cold, professional detachment. Mr. Ryan, Mr. Benjamin said, his voice crisp and formal. Please, have a seat. Ryan sank back into his chair, his legs suddenly feeling weak. The excitement and confidence he had felt just moments ago had evaporated, replaced by a sickening dread. Mr. Benjamin took his seat at the head of the table, placing a sleek laptop in front of him. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. I believe we already met and we have some matters to discuss before we proceed with our meeting, Mr. Benjamin said, his tone measured but with an unmistakable edge of disapproval. Ryan swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had been so focused on impressing Mr. Benjamin with his art that he hadn't considered the possibility of his behavior on the plane affecting this meeting. Now, faced with the consequences of his actions, he felt utterly unprepared. The atmosphere in the room was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. Ryan's portfolio, which had seemed so important just minutes ago, now lay forgotten on the table. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that his art might not even matter anymore. The real test was about to begin, and it had nothing to do with his talent as an artist. Mr. Benjamin leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. His eyes, once warm with the promise of opportunity, now held a steely resolve. Before we discuss your art, Mr. Ryan, I believe we need to address a more pressing matter, he began, his voice calm but firm. Ryan felt his stomach twist. He knew what was coming, but he wasn't prepared for it. Not here, not now, when everything he'd worked for hung in the balance. In the art world, integrity is paramount, Mr. Benjamin continued. Our work isn't just about creating beautiful pieces. It's about reflecting the best of humanity, inspiring others, and fostering understanding. Ryan nodded mechanically, his mouth dry. He wanted to speak, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. What I witnessed on that plane, Mr. Benjamin paused, shaking his head. It was deeply disappointing. Your behavior towards that woman was not just disrespectful, it was cruel. The memory of Ruth's kind face flashed in Ryan's mind, followed quickly by the shame of his own actions. He felt his cheeks burn. I was stressed, Ryan finally managed to stammer out. The flight was delayed, and I had this important meeting. Mr. Benjamin held up a hand, cutting him off. We all face stress, Mr. Ryan, but how we handle it speaks volumes about our character. And in this industry, your character, your reputation, is everything. The weight of those words settled heavily on Ryan's shoulders. He had always thought his art would speak for itself, but now he realized that his actions spoke louder than any painting ever could. I understand you're talented, Mr. Benjamin continued, his tone softening slightly. Your portfolio speaks to that, but talent isn't enough. We need artists who can represent our values, who can be role models in the community. Ryan felt a glimmer of hope at the mention of his portfolio. Maybe all wasn't lost. I can do better, he said, trying to infuse his voice with sincerity. I made a mistake, but it won't happen again. Mr. Benjamin studied him for a long moment. Words are easy, Mr. Ryan. Actions are what matter. You'll need to prove that you can be the kind of person this museum wants to associate with. Ryan nodded eagerly, willing to agree to anything that might salvage this opportunity. But as he looked into Mr. Benjamin's eyes, he realized the enormity of the task ahead. This wasn't just about apologizing or making amends. It was about fundamentally changing who he was. The pressure was mounting. Ryan could feel his dreams slipping away with each passing second. He knew he had to tread carefully now, to choose his words wisely. Everything he had worked for, everything he had dreamed of, hung in the balance of this conversation. Mr. Benjamin leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Ryan's face. Let me tell you about the woman you so callously insulted on that flight, he said, his voice low and measured. Ryan's heart raced. He hadn't expected this turn in the conversation. Her name is Ruth, Mr. Benjamin continued, and she's not just any passenger you happen to sit next to. Ruth is one of the most respected curators in the art world. She chose to be kind and not reveal her identity. Ryan's eyes widened in shock. He felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. For decades, Ruth has been a driving force in promoting diverse voices in art. Her eye for talent is legendary, and her support can make or break careers. Ryan's mind reeled as he tried to process this information. The kind, elderly woman he had treated so poorly was a key figure in the very world he was trying to enter. Mr. Benjamin's voice grew stern. Do you understand the gravity of your actions now, Mr. Ryan? You didn't just insult a fellow passenger. You discredited yourself in front of someone who could have been your greatest advocate. Ryan felt sick to his stomach. He remembered Ruth's gentle attempts to engage him in conversation, her calm demeanor in the face of his hostility. He had thrown away a golden opportunity without even realizing it. Ruth's influence extends far beyond her curatorial work, Mr. Benjamin explained. She mentors young artists, champions underrepresented voices, and sits on the boards of several prestigious institutions, including ours. Each word felt like a blow to Ryan. He had always prided himself on his networking skills, on knowing the right people. But his prejudices had blinded him to the most important connection he could have made. Her support could have elevated your career in ways you can't even imagine, Mr. Benjamin said, shaking his head. A word from Ruth can open doors that remain closed to most artists for years. Ryan's anxiety intensified. He realized that his behavior on the flight wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment. It could have lasting consequences for his entire career. But instead of recognizing the opportunity before you, you chose to let your biases dictate your actions, Mr. Benjamin continued. You didn't just miss a chance, Mr. Ryan. You actively pushed away someone who could have been your greatest ally in this industry. The weight of his actions settled heavily on Ryan's shoulders. He had come to this meeting full of hope and ambition, certain that his talent would speak for itself. Now, he understood that his behavior had spoken louder than any painting ever could. Ryan's face paled as the full weight of his actions crashed down upon him. His hands trembled slightly as he clasped them together on the table. "Mr. Benjamin, I'm so sorry," he stammered, his voice thick with regret. "I had no idea. My behavior was inexcusable. Is there any way I can make this right?" Mr. Benjamin's expression remained stern, but a flicker of something, perhaps recognition of Ryan's sincerity, passed across his face. "Your apology is noted, Mr. Ryan," he said slowly, "but I'm not the one you need to apologize to." Ryan nodded vigorously. "Of course you're right, I need to apologize to Ruth. I was horrible to her. She didn't deserve that." Mr. Benjamin leaned back in his chair, studying Ryan carefully. "I appreciate that you understand the gravity of your actions now. But I must be frank with you. The damage may already be done." Ryan's heart sank further. He felt like he was drowning in a sea of his own making. "Ruth's opinion carries significant weight in our industry," Mr. Benjamin continued. "If she chooses to speak against you, it could have severe consequences for your career. Many doors that might have been open to you could slam shut." Ryan's mind raced, trying to grasp the full implications of what Mr. Benjamin was saying. He had come to this meeting full of hope, dreaming of his big break. Now he was facing the possibility that his career might be over before it truly began. Is there anything I can do?" Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Benjamin sighed. "That remains to be seen. Ruth is a compassionate person, but she's also a staunch advocate for respect and dignity in our field. Your actions on that plane went against everything she stands for." Ryan nodded, feeling utterly defeated. He had let his prejudices and frustration get the better of him, and now he was paying the price. "I understand," Ryan said softly. "I made a terrible mistake. I let my stress and my biases control me. I know it's not an excuse, but I want to do better. I need to do better." Mr. Benjamin's expression softened slightly. "Recognition of one's faults is the first step towards change, Mr. Ryan, but it's only the beginning of a long journey." Mr. Benjamin leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Ryan. "I'm going to offer you a chance, Mr. Ryan. It's not an easy one, but it might be your only opportunity to make things right." Ryan's heart raced. He nodded eagerly, ready to grasp at any lifeline offered to him. "There's an upcoming charity art gala," Mr. Benjamin explained. "Ruth will be honored there for her contributions to diversity in the art world." Ryan listened intently, his mind already spinning with possibilities. "I want you to attend this gala," Mr. Benjamin continued, "but not just as a guest. You'll need to present a piece of art that embodies themes of acceptance and diversity." Ryan's eyes widened. This was unexpected, but he felt a glimmer of hope. Art was his language, his way of expressing himself. Maybe through his work, he could convey what he was struggling to say with words. "There's more," Mr. Benjamin added, his tone serious. "During the gala, you'll need to publicly acknowledge your past mistakes and commit to embracing the values of inclusion and kindness." Ryan felt his stomach drop. The thought of standing in front of a crowd, admitting his faults, terrified him. But as he considered the alternative, the end of his career before it truly began, he knew he had no choice. "Do you understand what I'm asking of you, Mr. Ryan?" Mr. Benjamin asked. "This won't be easy. You'll be putting yourself out there, vulnerable to criticism and judgment. But it's also an opportunity to show genuine growth and commitment to change." Ryan took a deep breath. The challenge before him felt enormous. He would have to confront his prejudices head-on, not just privately, but in front of the very people he had wronged and those whose respect he desperately wanted to earn. "I understand," Ryan said softly. It's a lot. But I know I need to do this. Not just for my career, but because it's the right thing to do." Mr. Benjamin nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. "Good. Remember, this is your last chance to redeem yourself, Mr. Ryan. Make it count. As Ryan left the meeting room, he felt the weight of the challenge settling on his shoulders. He knew the coming weeks would be filled with intense self-reflection and hard work. But for the first time since the incident on the plane, he felt a spark of hope. This was his chance to prove that he could change, that he could be better. Ryan sat at his desk in the hotel room, his hands trembling slightly as he sketched out ideas for his art piece. The upcoming gala loomed large in his mind, a mix of opportunity and dread swirling in his thoughts. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. As he drew, memories of the plane incident flashed through his mind. He winced, remembering the harsh words he had spoken to Ruth, the kind elderly woman who had only tried to help him. Shame washed over him, making his cheeks burn. "How could I have been so blind?" he muttered to himself, shaking his head. Ryan's eyes drifted to the blank canvas propped up against the wall. It seemed to stare back at him, challenging him to fill it with something meaningful. He knew this piece had to be different from anything he'd created before. It needed to show not just his artistic skill, but his heart and his willingness to change. He closed his eyes, recalling Mr. Benjamin's words from their meeting. The man's disappointment had been clear, cutting Ryan to the core, but it was the challenge he'd presented that really stuck with Ryan. "Embrace the values of inclusion and kindness," Ryan repeated softly, letting the words sink in. As he opened his eyes and looked back at his sketches, a new idea began to form. He started to draw faster, his pencil flying across the paper. In his mind's eye, he saw a piece that would show hands of different colors, intertwined and supporting each other. It wasn't just about diversity, he realized, but about connection and understanding. Ryan's anxiety didn't disappear, but it shifted. Instead of fear about what others would think of him, he worried about whether he could truly convey his transformation through his art. Could he show that he was learning, growing, becoming a better person? As he worked, Ryan thought about all the times in his life when he'd let his prejudices guide his actions. It was uncomfortable to face, but he knew it was necessary. This gala wasn't just about saving his career anymore. It was about becoming the kind of person he wanted to be. The day of the gala finally arrived, and Ryan stood in front of the mirror in his hotel room, adjusting his tie for what felt like the 100th time. His hands shook slightly as he smoothed down his suit jacket, trying to calm his nerves. "You can do this," he whispered to his reflection, his voice barely audible. Ryan's heart raced as he thought about the evening ahead. He was about to face a room full of people, including Ruth and Mr. Benjamin, and openly admit to his mistakes. The thought made his stomach churn, but he knew it was necessary. Taking a deep breath, Ryan turned to the covered canvas leaning against the wall. He gently ran his fingers over the cloth, thinking about the piece he had poured his heart and soul into over the past few days. It wasn't just a painting, it was his apology, his promise to do better. "Okay, let's go over this one more time," Ryan said to himself, clearing his throat, practicing his speech. He began to recite the speech he had practiced countless times. "Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today not just as an artist, but as a man who has made grave mistakes." As he spoke, his voice grew steadier, more confident. He wasn't just memorizing words anymore. He was feeling them, believing them. "And to Ruth, I want to say I'm truly sorry. Your kindness in the face of my cruelty showed me what true strength looks like." Ryan paused, his eyes welling up with tears. He hadn't expected to get emotional during his rehearsal, but the weight of his words hit him hard. He realized how much he meant every single one of them. Wiping his eyes, Ryan checked his watch. It was time to leave for the gala. He carefully picked up his canvas, cradling it like a precious child, and headed for the door. As he rode the elevator down to the lobby, Ryan's mind raced with a mix of emotions. He was terrified of facing the crowd, of seeing disappointment in Ruth's eyes. But underneath that fear was a glimmer of hope. Hope that he could make things right, that he could become a better person. The taxi ride to the venue was a blur. Ryan clutched his canvas close, his knuckles white with tension. He tried to focus on the city lights flashing by, anything to distract him from the knot in his stomach. Before he knew it, the taxi pulled up to a grand building lit up for the evening's event. Ryan stepped out, his legs feeling like jelly beneath him. He could hear the murmur of voices and soft music drifting from inside. Taking one last deep breath, Ryan squared his shoulders and walked towards the entrance. He was ready to face his past, make amends, and hopefully, start a new chapter in his life. As Ryan entered the gala, he was immediately enveloped by the buzzing energy of the crowd. The room sparkled with elegance, filled with well-dressed art enthusiasts and industry professionals. Soft classical music floated through the air, mingling with the gentle clink of champagne glasses and the murmur of sophisticated conversation. Ryan's eyes darted around nervously, searching for familiar faces. He clutched his canvas tighter, using it as a shield against the sea of strangers. As he made his way through the crowd, he overheard snippets of excited chatter about Ruth and her contributions to the art world. Suddenly, the room fell silent as the master of ceremonies took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in honoring our guest of the evening, the remarkable Ruth Johnson." The crowd erupted in applause as Ruth gracefully made her way to the stage. Ryan felt his breath catch in his throat as he saw her. She looked radiant, her silver hair elegantly styled, and her eyes twinkling with warmth. As she stood at the podium, her presence commanded respect and admiration. One by one, speakers came forward to pay tribute to Ruth. They spoke of her tireless efforts to promote diversity in the art world, her keen eye for talent, and her unwavering kindness. With each word, Ryan felt a growing sense of shame and regret for how he had treated her on the plane. As he listened to the accolades, Ryan's mind wandered back to that fateful flight. He remembered his harsh words, his dismissive attitude, and Ruth's graceful response. The contrast between his behavior and the woman being honored on stage was stark and painful. Time seemed to fly by, and before Ryan knew it, it was his turn to speak. He felt his heart pounding in his chest as he heard his name called. The audience turned to look at him, their faces a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Ryan took a deep breath and stepped forward, his canvas still clutched tightly in his hands. The weight of the moment pressed down on him as he made his way to the stage. Each step felt like a mile, his legs heavy with the burden of his past actions and the importance of what he was about to do. As he reached the podium, Ryan looked out at the sea of faces before him. He saw Mr. Benjamin in the crowd, his expression unreadable. And there, in the front row, sat Ruth, her eyes meeting his with a gentle, encouraging smile. Ryan's hands trembled as he set his canvas down and gripped the edges of the podium. He cleared his throat, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. This was it, the moment of truth. He was about to bare his soul to confront his past mistakes in front of everyone. Ryan's voice trembled as he began his speech, but he pressed on, determined to face his mistakes head on. "Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today not just as an artist, but as a man who has made grave mistakes," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd. He took a deep breath, steadying himself before continuing. "On my flight here, I behaved in a way that I'm deeply ashamed of. I let my prejudices and frustrations get the better of me, and I treated a fellow passenger, someone I now know to be the esteemed Ruth Johnson, with shocking disrespect." Ryan's gaze found Ruth in the audience, her kind eyes encouraging him to go on. "My actions that day were inexcusable. I allowed my own narrow-mindedness to blind me to the incredible person sitting right next to me. I nearly threw away a chance to learn from one of the most respected figures in our industry, all because of my own biases." As he spoke, Ryan could feel the weight of the audience's gaze. Some faces showed surprise, others disappointment, but he didn't let it deter him. He knew he had to keep going, to lay bare his faults and his journey. "I stand here today humbled and changed by this experience," Ryan continued, his voice growing stronger. "Ruth's grace in the face of my behavior was nothing short of inspiring. Despite my hostility, she responded with kindness and understanding. It's a lesson I won't soon forget." Ryan paused, allowing his words to sink in. He could see people leaning in, listening intently. "Ruth's response to my actions has taught me more about true strength and character than any success I've had in my career. Her ability to maintain her composure and respond with empathy in the face of such disrespect is a testament to her character." As he spoke about Ruth's impact, Ryan's voice filled with genuine admiration. In that moment, and in the days since, Ruth has shown me what it truly means to be a leader in our field. It's not just about talent or recognition. It's about how we treat others, how we respond to adversity, and how we use our platform to promote understanding and inclusivity. Ryan's eyes welled up with tears as he continued, his emotions raw and visible to all. I stand before you today, not as someone who has it all figured out, but as someone who is committed to learning, growing, and doing better. Ruth's grace has inspired me to confront my own prejudices and to strive to be a better person, both in my art and in my interactions with others. As Ryan concluded his speech, he turned to face Ruth, who sat in the front row. Her warm, encouraging smile gave him the strength to continue. With a deep breath, he addressed her directly, his voice filled with genuine remorse and gratitude. "Ruth," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I want to apologize to you personally. Your kindness and understanding in the face of my horrible behavior have taught me so much. I'm truly sorry for how I treated you, and I'm incredibly grateful for the grace you've shown me." Ryan's words hung in the air, raw and honest. The audience watched in rapt silence as this vulnerable moment unfolded before them. Many were visibly moved, dabbing at their eyes or nodding in understanding. Ruth's eyes glistened with tears as she listened to Ryan's heartfelt apology. Slowly, she rose from her seat, her gaze never leaving Ryan's face. The crowd held its breath, waiting to see how she would respond. With deliberate steps, Ruth made her way to the stage. Ryan watched her approach, his heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and hope. As she reached him, Ruth opened her arms wide. Without hesitation, Ryan stepped into her embrace. The moment was powerful and poignant, a physical representation of forgiveness and transformation. Ruth held him tightly, her actions speaking louder than any words could. The audience, moved by this display of compassion, broke into applause. Some wiped away tears while others nodded approvingly. The sound filled the room, a testament to the impact of this moment of reconciliation. As they parted from their embrace, Ruth kept her hands on Ryan's shoulders. She looked into his eyes, her own filled with warmth and understanding. "Thank you, Ryan," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "Your words and your willingness to change mean so much. This is what growth looks like, and I'm proud to witness it." Her public affirmation of Ryan's transformation sent a ripple of approval through the crowd. It was a powerful endorsement from a respected figure in their industry, acknowledging the importance of forgiveness and personal growth. The audience erupted into thunderous applause, deeply moved by Ryan's sincere apology and Ruth's gracious response. The sound filled the room, a testament to the power of forgiveness and personal growth. Many in the crowd were visibly touched, wiping away tears or nodding in approval. From his seat near the front, Mr. Benjamin watched the scene unfold with growing admiration. He had challenged Ryan to face his mistakes, but the artist's courage and genuine remorse surpassed his expectations. A small smile played on Mr. Benjamin's lips as he witnessed the transformation he had hoped for, but wasn't sure would come to pass. As the applause began to die down, Ruth gently squeezed Ryan's arm and turned to face the audience. Her eyes sparkled with wisdom and compassion as she addressed the crowd. "My friends," she began, her voice warm and clear, "what we've just witnessed is a beautiful example of the power of second chances." She paused, letting her words sink in. Each one of us has the capacity to learn and grow, no matter our age or past mistakes. Ruth's words resonated through the room, capturing everyone's attention. She continued, "It takes great courage to admit when we're wrong and even more strength to change. Ryan has shown us both tonight." As Ruth spoke, Ryan felt a wave of relief wash over him. The weight he had been carrying since that fateful plane ride began to lift. He realized that this moment, this public acknowledgement of his mistakes and commitment to change, was the first real step toward redemption. Ruth's voice grew stronger as she concluded, "Let this be a reminder to us all. In a world that often seems divided, it's moments like these that bring us together. It's never too late to learn, to grow, and to become better versions of ourselves." The audience once again broke into applause, moved by Ruth's words of wisdom and the powerful scene they had just witnessed. Ryan stood there, overwhelmed by the support and acceptance he felt from the crowd. He caught Mr. Benjamin's eye in the audience and saw a nod of approval, further confirming that he had taken the right step forward. As the gala wound down, Ryan found himself in a quiet corner of the room, his heart still racing from the emotional events of the evening. He took a deep breath, feeling lighter than he had in years. The weight of his prejudices and anger that had burdened him for so long seemed to have lifted, replaced by a newfound sense of hope and purpose. He gazed around the room, observing the diverse crowd of artists, patrons, and art enthusiasts mingling and chatting. For the first time, he saw the beauty in their differences, rather than feeling threatened by them. A small smile played on his lips as he realized how much he had been missing out on by closing himself off to others. A young artist approached Ryan, her eyes shining with admiration. "Your speech was so powerful," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah. Would you mind sharing more about your journey?" Ryan nodded, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "Of course," he replied, his voice soft but steady. "It's been a long road, and I'm still learning." As he recounted his experience on the plane and the events that followed, a small group gathered around him. They listened intently, nodding and offering words of encouragement. Ryan found himself opening up more than he ever had before, sharing not just the events but the emotions behind them. "I never realized how much my anger and prejudice were holding me back," he admitted. "Not just in my career, but in my life. It took a moment of crisis to wake me up." An older gentleman in the group spoke up. "It's not easy to face our flaws, especially in public. But that's how real change happens. You've set an example for all of us." Ryan felt a lump form in his throat, touched by the man's words. He looked around at the faces surrounding him, seeing not judgment but understanding and acceptance. For the first time in his career, he felt truly part of a community. As the conversation flowed, Ryan found himself discussing the importance of inclusivity in the art world. He listened more than he spoke, absorbing the diverse perspectives and experiences shared by those around him. Each story opened his eyes a little wider, helping him see the richness that diversity brought to art and life. "I've been so focused on my own success," Ryan confessed, "that I never stopped to consider how much stronger we are when we support each other. How much more beautiful art can be when it reflects all of our experiences." The group nodded in agreement, and Ryan felt a sense of belonging wash over him. He realized that by embracing growth and understanding, he had not only saved his career, but had also found a place where he truly fit. As the weeks passed, Ryan found himself immersed in a world he had never truly experienced before. The art community, once a source of frustration and competition, now felt like a welcoming family. He spent his days in his studio, brush in hand, pouring his newfound understanding and emotions onto canvas. His latest piece was a vibrant tapestry of colors and faces, each one unique, yet harmoniously blended. As he worked, Ryan thought about Ruth's kindness, Mr. Benjamin's guidance, and the warmth of his new friends. These experiences flowed through him, bringing life to his art in ways he had never imagined. One afternoon, as Ryan was putting the finishing touches on his painting, a knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find Sarah, the young artist he had met at the gala, standing there with a bright smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, peering around him curiously. "I was wondering if you'd like to join us for coffee. A bunch of us are meeting to discuss ideas for the upcoming community art project." Ryan felt a flutter of excitement in his chest. "I'd love to," he replied, grabbing his jacket. As they walked to the cafe, Ryan found himself chatting easily with Sarah about their latest works and inspirations. At the cafe, Ryan was greeted warmly by a diverse group of artists. They spent hours brainstorming ideas for a mural that would celebrate the city's multicultural heritage. Ryan listened intently, offering suggestions and feeling a sense of belonging he had never experienced before in his career. As the meeting wrapped up, Ryan noticed Mr. Benjamin entering the cafe. The museum director spotted him and made his way over, a warm smile on his face. "Ryan," Mr. Benjamin said, extending his hand, "I'm glad I caught you. Do you have a moment?" Ryan nodded, excusing himself from the group. He and Mr. Benjamin found a quiet corner to talk. "I wanted to express my excitement about your upcoming exhibition," Mr. Benjamin began, his eyes twinkling. "From what I've heard and seen, I believe it will be a truly meaningful contribution to our museum." Ryan felt a surge of pride and gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Benjamin. I can't express how much this opportunity means to me, and not just for my career, but for my personal growth as well." Mr. Benjamin nodded approvingly. "That's exactly why I believe in this exhibition, Ryan. It's not just about the art, it's about the journey and the message. Your work is reflecting the themes of acceptance and diversity in a way that I think will resonate deeply with our visitors." As they continued to discuss the details of the exhibition, Ryan felt a sense of purpose and passion that he had never experienced before. He realized that his art was no longer just about personal success. It was about making a difference and bringing people together. As the weeks passed, Ruth and Ryan began to spend more time together, their initial encounter on the plane now a distant memory. Ruth, with her wealth of experience in the art world, took Ryan under her wing, offering guidance and insights that he had never considered before. One sunny afternoon, they met at Ruth's favorite cafe, a cozy spot filled with local artwork. Ruth sipped her tea, her eyes twinkling as she watched Ryan sketch idly on a napkin. "You know, Ryan," she began, her voice warm and encouraging, "your work has always had potential, but now I see a depth that wasn't there before." Ryan looked up, a mixture of surprise and gratitude on his face. "Really? I feel like I'm seeing everything differently now. It's like I've been given a new pair of eyes." Ruth nodded, understanding in her gaze. "That's growth, my dear, and it's beautiful to witness." As they continued to meet, Ruth shared stories of her own struggles in the art world, the barriers she had faced as a Black woman, and how she had overcome them. Ryan listened intently, his heart heavy with the realization of how much he had taken for granted. One day, as they walked through a local gallery, Ruth turned to Ryan with a spark in her eye. "I have an idea," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "Why don't we collaborate on a project? Something that combines our visions and showcases the beauty of diversity?" Ryan's face lit up. "That sounds amazing, Ruth. What did you have in mind?" Over the next few weeks, they worked tirelessly on their joint project. It was a large-scale installation piece that combined Ruth's classical training with Ryan's contemporary style. The artwork featured a series of interconnected panels, each telling a story of different cultures and experiences. As they painted side by side, Ryan found himself opening up to Ruth about his past prejudices and the journey he had been on. Ruth listened without judgment, offering words of encouragement and wisdom. "We all have room to grow, Ryan," she said softly one day, her brush pausing mid-stroke. "The important thing is that you recognized the need for change and took action." Ryan nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "I can't thank you enough, Ruth, for your forgiveness, your mentorship, everything." Ruth smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And I'm grateful for you, Ryan. Your journey has reminded me why I fell in love with art in the first place. It has the power to transform not just the artist, but those who experience it as well." As their project neared completion, Ryan realized how much he had learned from Ruth, not just about art techniques or industry knowledge, but about resilience, grace, and the importance of lifting others up. In turn, Ruth found herself reinvigorated by Ryan's enthusiasm and fresh perspective, his journey of self-discovery inspiring her own creative renaissance. Their collaborative piece stood as a testament to the power of diversity and understanding, a visual representation of two different worlds coming together in harmony. As they stood back to admire their work, both Ruth and Ryan felt a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond the canvas before them. As the days ticked down to the exhibition, Ryan felt a mix of excitement and nerves bubbling up inside him. He stood in his studio, surrounded by his completed works, each piece a testament to his journey of growth and self-discovery. Running his hand through his graying hair, Ryan took a deep breath. He thought back to that fateful flight, remembering the anger and prejudice that had clouded his vision. It seemed like a lifetime ago now. A small smile played on his lips as he realized how far he'd come, It's just the beginning, he murmured to himself, picking up a paintbrush and twirling it between his fingers. In the weeks leading up to the exhibition, Ryan was touched by the outpouring of support from the community. Artists he'd never met before reached out to offer encouragement. Local businesses put up flyers promoting the event. Even the barista at his favorite coffee shop wished him luck every morning. One afternoon, as Ryan was putting the finishing touches on a painting, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Ruth. "Just wanted to remind you how proud I am of you," it read. "Can't wait to see your work shine." Ryan's eyes misted over as he read the message. He never imagined he'd find such a dear friend and mentor in Ruth. Her guidance had been invaluable, both in his art and in his personal growth. Finally, the night of the exhibition arrived. Ryan stood in the gallery, surrounded by his artwork. The space buzzed with energy as people began to file in. He smoothed down his shirt, taking deep breaths to calm his racing heart. "You've got this," a familiar voice said behind him. Ryan turned to see Ruth, her eyes twinkling with pride. As more people arrived, Ryan found himself surrounded by friends and supporters. Mr. Benjamin was there, nodding approvingly as he examined the pieces. Fellow artists from the community mingled with art enthusiasts, their excited chatter filling the room. Ryan's chest swelled with a sense of belonging he'd never felt before. He looked around at the faces of those who had supported him, who had believed in his ability to change and grow. It was a far cry from the lonely, bitter man he'd been just months ago. As he prepared to address the crowd, Ryan caught sight of his reflection in a nearby mirror. He saw a man transformed, not just by his experiences, but by the kindness and forgiveness of others. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, ready to share his story and his art with the world. As the exhibition opened its doors, the gallery buzzed with excitement. People streamed in, their eyes widening as they took in Ryan's artwork. The pieces, vibrant and thought-provoking, captured the journey of transformation and unity that Ryan had experienced. Ryan stood near the entrance, greeting guests with a warm smile. He felt a surge of joy as he watched people engage with his art, discussing the themes and emotions conveyed in each piece. The room was filled with a positive energy that seemed to radiate from the artwork itself. "This is incredible, Ryan," Mr. Benjamin said, approaching him with a beaming smile. "You've truly outdone yourself." Ryan felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the praise. "Thank you, sir. I couldn't have done it without your guidance and second chance." As the night progressed, Ryan found himself surrounded by admirers and fellow artists. They congratulated him on his work, many sharing how his story of redemption had touched them personally. Ryan listened intently, his heart swelling with gratitude for this newfound community. Across the room, he spotted Ruth. She was standing in front of one of his paintings, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Ryan made his way over to her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Ruth," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for me." Ruth turned to him, her face radiating pride and joy. "Oh, Ryan," she said, pulling him into a warm embrace. "You did this. You opened your heart and allowed yourself to grow. I'm just glad I could be a part of your journey." As they hugged, Ryan felt a profound sense of connection. Their paths had indeed intertwined in the most unexpected and beautiful way. He realized that Ruth's forgiveness and mentorship had not only saved his career, but had also transformed his entire outlook on life. Breaking apart, they both wiped away tears and shared a laugh. Around them, the exhibition continued in full swing, a testament to the power of second chances and the beauty of human connection. As the night began to wind down, Ryan found himself standing in front of his centerpiece, a large canvas that depicted hands of different colors intertwined, symbolizing unity and acceptance. He gazed at it, reflecting on the incredible journey that had led him to this moment. If you enjoyed the story of Ryan, Ruth, and Benjamin, I handpicked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.